So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My first time from this position. On first reading, I think our gospel reading this morning wasn't particularly cheerful or encouraging. Life isn't going to be particularly good, Jesus is saying there. It comes very soon before his death. They're in Jerusalem, Jesus and his disciples, and they're all looking at the temple, and the temple was quite something. It had been built by Herod. We know Herod wasn't a particularly nice guy, but he liked to kind of big himself up. So he built this very grand, wonderful affair. And it wasn't quite finished, but they were looking at this amazing building. And Jesus is telling them it's going to be torn down. That must have come as a shock to them. So he's preparing them at this point for something to come. But what is that? Not quite sure what he's preparing them for. Is it the end of time and the coming of the kingdom? Or is it the destruction of the temple and what that might mean? Theologians, and I'm not one, will argue the case. But they seem to be coming down on the side of he's talking about the destruction of the temple at this point. And we do know from history that the temple was destroyed. In AD 70, the Romans destroyed that temple. And Jesus knew that was going to happen, as ever. And he's preparing disciples for that. And the destruction of the temple to these people, who were Jews, remember, and this was a major thing for Jews. The temple in Jerusalem was the centre of their religion, of their culture, of everything. Remember the stories of Jesus with his parents being taken to the temple? Every year they would go to the temple. So it was a major focal point. So to them, being told the temple's going to be destroyed would be like the end of the world. This is a dreadful thing. Imagine being told Westminster Abbey is going to be destroyed. Or for us, St James's Park's going to be destroyed. Can you imagine the horror there would be in the thought of exactly that? So the disciples are saying, so how will we know when this is going to happen then? What will be the signs? At the time, they would be looking for signs in the sky. At that time, astrologers would see a light in the sky, find a comet, see a star they hadn't seen before, and they would interpret that as being a sign of great danger. And that's probably what the disciples were expecting Jesus to tell them. There will be lights in the sky, a thunderbolt will come. But that isn't what he tells them. He tells them there'll be wars, there'll be earthquakes, there will be all these signs. But don't be afraid when you see these things happening. Other things have to happen. That isn't the end. He warns them to beware of false messiahs. People coming in his name. He knows he isn't going to be there when this happens. So he's warning them against false messiahs and false prophets. And we know, I think, in our terms, quite a lot about false prophets. We can identify with many people in our own world who are claiming to deliver all sorts of things and yet don't quite get there. But we're not going to go there in a minute. We have no shortage. If we go on to the book of Acts, we'll find that there were people that came after Jesus and claimed to be the Messiah. And nothing came of it. He goes on to tell them that they'll be prosecuted. They'll be hated because they're followers of Jesus. That's really not very encouraging. That's not very reassuring. and he's saying he's not going to be there. And they're going to be prosecuted not just by strangers, by soldiers, but by their family and their friends. And remember, he was betrayed by one of his friends. Judas betrayed Jesus, having been one of his followers for quite some time. They didn't know that at the time. We look back on these things with the benefit of our knowledge. He says some will die. And in fact, in the book of Acts, we find that actually most of them are put to death. Again, it's not very encouraging. Sticking by Jesus is not exactly going to be a long-living occupation for them. So you're not going to be really thrilled by this. But he says, when you're being persecuted, don't be proud. Don't think about what you're going to say. You'll be given an opportunity to testify. And he means to testify about what he's been teaching, about how he wants us to live in the kingdom of God. And you'll get an opportunity to do that. He says, by your endurance, you will gain your souls. By standing firm, you will get life. And he means eternal life. He means that life will go on. And that can't have been an easy thing for anyone to hear. He's been telling them he's going to be killed, and he has to be killed. He's been telling them he's not going to be around. And now he tells them their life isn't going to be up to much either. Really not appeasing them at all, I don't think. And yet they stuck with it. And yet when you go on to the book of Acts, they did go out. They had the faith to do that. And so where does that get us? Well, I'm not sure that St James's Park is going to be torn down. Or even the stadium in which depending on your allegiance. But we've all had times in our lives when our temples, whatever they might be, have been torn down. When there have been times when it seems like the end of our world, that life has been difficult. And being a follower of Jesus is not easy for lots of people. At those times when the temple's gone, where do we turn? We feel sometimes that God has abandoned us. Jesus is saying we can expect things to be difficult. We may not be persecuted for our faith here in this country, but many, many places in the world people are. And they're fleeing their homes and their countries because being a Christian is against the law. So, for us, it may not be persecution in the same way, but it is for some of our brothers and sisters. But Jesus says, although we can expect things to be difficult, that he will be with us. He will give us the wisdom. He'll give us the words when we need them. How many times have we been in a position where we're facing a situation and we don't know what we're going to say, and we don't know what we're going to do, but somehow the words come. Somehow we just know what to do. Jesus is with us in those difficult times. That's what he's telling the disciples at this point, that he will give them the courage and the strength to carry on, although it is going to be difficult. And he's telling us that too. Life is hard. Sometimes it is difficult to take away and have to keep going. encouraged by what Jesus is saying. And if we look at all of our readings today, if we go back to the book of Malachi, that first reading, that's an encouraging reading. It says, the day is coming when all the arrogant and evildoers will be stubble. But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. It goes on to say, and you will go out leaping like calves, free from the storm. Paul to the Thessalonians is telling them, do not be weary in doing what is right. We can take encouragement from both of those. Jesus will help us work out what is right when he needs to. And we can be encouraged that that will happen. So, what might have seemed a not particularly optimistic or encouraging kind of gospel reading actually is. And whilst we may not go out this morning leaping like calves, we can go out standing firm in our faith that Jesus is with us, always.